The day the sky caught fire. 66 million years ago, Earth was a warm, green paradise crawling with dinosaurs, and then, in a single afternoon, all of that ended. A 6-mile-wide asteroid slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula at 45,000 miles per hour, hitting with the force of 10 billion atomic bombs, and the impact was so violent it punched a hole 20 miles deep into the crust and vaporized solid rock on contact. The strike hit shallow ocean sulfur deposits, so it didn't just release dust, it blasted a colossal cloud of pulverized rock and sulfuric acid straight into the stratosphere, and within hours, that debris rained back down as white-hot glass, igniting global wildfires that scorched every forest on the planet. If you were standing 1,000 miles away, you wouldn't even see the fireball, you'd just feel the ground shudder, watch the sky turn orange, and then black. The soot blotted out the sun for years, dropping global temperatures and killing off the plants that fed everything else, and 3 out of every 4 species on Earth vanished. Buried in the ash, though, were small, shivering mammals who would inherit the wreckage. The year without a sun. The sky over Indonesia split open 74,000 years ago, when a supervolcano named Toba erupted with a force no human has ever witnessed. It didn't just explode, it detonated, ejecting an estimated 700 cubic miles of ash and rock, enough to bury an entire country several feet deep, and the eruption punched sulfur dioxide 25 miles into the stratosphere, wrapping the entire globe in a hazy, light-choking veil. Sunlight couldn't reach the surface properly, and global temperatures crashed by as much as 15 degrees Fahrenheit for years afterward, triggering what scientists call a volcanic winter, and crops failed as forests died. Ash rained down as far away as India, coating everything in a thick gray shroud, and some genetic evidence suggests the human population on Earth may have crashed to as few as a few thousand breeding individuals, a bottleneck so severe that every person alive today may be descended from those survivors. It was, quite possibly, the closest our own species ever came to blinking out entirely. The freeze that wouldn't end. Just as the world finally began thawing out of the last ice age, roughly 12,800 years ago, it slammed back into a deep freeze without warning, and mammoths were migrating north and forests were creeping back when the freeze returned. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas, and it hit with terrifying speed, and within a matter of decades, maybe less, temperatures in some regions plunged by over 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The likely trigger was a sudden flood of meltwater from a collapsing ice sheet pouring into the North Atlantic, shutting down the ocean currents that carry warmth up from the tropics, and that current effectively acts like the planet's heating system, so switching it off sent Europe and North America back into glacial conditions almost overnight. Grasslands that had just turned green were buried under ice again, and entire ecosystems that early humans depended on collapsed within a single generation. For over 1,000 years, the world stayed locked in this false winter before the climate finally, and just as abruptly, snapped back to warmth. The extinction written in ice. Beneath calm Ordovician seas, roughly 445 million years ago, life was thriving in oceans that covered almost the entire planet, and then the climate flipped violently in the opposite direction from what would later kill the dinosaurs. A massive ice age gripped the southern supercontinent, and gigantic glaciers began locking up the world's water, so sea levels collapsed by hundreds of feet as so much ocean froze solid, draining the shallow coastal seas where most life lived, and entire ecosystems were left stranded and dying in the retreating water. Just as the oceans adjusted to the cold, the ice sheets melted back just as fast, flooding the world again and starving the water of oxygen, and the double punch, first a savage freeze, then a suffocating flood, wiped out an estimated 85% of all marine species. It remains one of the most severe extinctions Earth has ever endured, and it happened before a single creature had even crawled onto dry land. The sky full of falling mountains. Fireballs never stopped falling during the late heavy bombardment, roughly 4 billion years ago, and Earth's newly cooled crust was under constant siege. Asteroids and comets, some the size of small countries, rained down from space for hundreds of millions of years. Because the early solar system was still cluttered with leftover debris from planet formation, so impacts weren't rare, they were routine. Each major strike vaporized oceans on contact, sent molten rock spraying for thousands of miles, and blanketed the sky in choking, sun-blocking dust, and if you had stood on the surface during this era, the ground beneath you would never have felt safe for long, craters forming and reforming as new impacts overwrote the old ones. Yet some scientists believe this violent hail of debris actually delivered the water and organic material that made life possible in the first place, so our own existence, in other words, may be a gift from the very chaos that should have destroyed the planet. The fern that nearly froze the world. The Arctic Ocean wasn't always the icy wasteland it is now, and 49 million years ago, it was a warm, isolated freshwater lake, cut off from the world's other oceans. Something strange happened next. A tiny floating fern called azala began to bloom across its surface, and it didn't stop, and the Arctic basin was so enclosed that the fern spread unchecked, forming a thick green carpet across millions of square miles of water. As new fern layers grew, the old ones sank and got buried in sediment, dragging enormous amounts of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere with them, and this happened for nearly 800,000 years straight. The carbon drawdown was so massive that it helped tip the entire planet out of its hothouse state and into the long, slow cooling trend that eventually built the ice caps we know today, and a single plant, quietly sinking to the bottom of a landlocked sea, may have reset the thermostat for the rest of Earth's history. Every one of these worlds was real, and the fire, the ash, the ice, the falling sky, they all happened right here, on the same ground we stand on now. Earth doesn't just have a past, it has a body count.